Welcome, everyone, to the League of Women Voters Empowering You. This program, designed by the League of Women Voters in partnership with Dayton Access Television, provides unbiased, nonpartisan information on issues that are relevant to our friends and neighbors throughout the greater Dayton area. My name is David Boday. I am a member of the League of Women Voters and your host as we discuss today's topic, Revisiting Redistricting 2024. Our guest today is Jen Miller. She is Executive Director for the League of Women Voters Ohio, and Jen has earned her Master's in Arts Policy, Education, and Administration from the John Glenn School of Public Affairs at The Ohio State University. She also holds 2 bachelor degrees, one in vocal music and history and ethnic studies from Capital University. Those degrees are going to have to be a different conversation, though, because today we're going to really focus in on some policy issues at the state level. And Jen, my hope is that we can talk about this redistricting business that it seems like we're coming back to time and time and time again. So let's take a minute to remind people about why we're still talking about redistricting now at the end of 2023 here in Ohio. It's almost 4 years after the census in 2020. So help me understand what's redistricting about and how's it connected to the census?
Right. So redistricting is when we redraw our legislative lines, both at the state house level and the congressional level. We do that every 10 years after the census because people move or pass away. So we want to make sure that the districts are updated to those population shifts. In 2015 and in 2018, Ohioans passed 2 constitutional amendments to reform the way maps were made. And they were endorsed by both political parties as well as a lot of nonpartisan and good government groups like League. But in fact, the politicians who sat on the redistricting commission just couldn't help themselves. They used their power to draw lines that protected incumbents, so protected their own jobs and their own ability to get reelected, as well as protecting their friends' ability to get reelected. And that's what we call gerrymandering. It's when voting districts are drawn to favor politicians and parties. And it's actually something that the League of Women Voters has been fighting for a long time. We fought Democrats when they were the ones rigging the maps in the 60s and 70s. And we fought Republicans when they've done it. At the end of the day, gerrymandering always hurts voters because when maps are drawn to favor politicians, those politicians don't have to listen to you and me. They do not have to be responsive to voters. They know they're going to win their seat because it's rigged for them to do so. And so they can play to party extremes and deep-pocketed donors at the expense of every Ohioan.
I appreciate that. And the language that I think about that makes sense to me is that in a gerrymandered district, politicians choose their voters rather than voters choosing their preferred politicians. And I think what happens is we end up becoming more polarized because in a gerrymandered district, we're going to know that a Democrat or a Republican will get elected. So then it's the most extreme version of whatever party that is most likely to get more votes. And so then we begin to kind of create this division, this increasing division between what I consider to be more middle ground, mostly the voters that I engage with.
Sure. Well, we see that to be true. When districts are rigged to favor one party over another, the most important election becomes the primary. And not every voter will be able to participate in that primary. And so they end up playing to the extremes of each party. So you are right. Partisan gerrymandering, and we have a long history of it here in Ohio, increases governmental dysfunction, it increases partisan divides, and increases voter frustration. And that's why we really need to end this process. Ohioans have an opportunity to regain their voice. Ohioans have an opportunity to pass a real reform, a constitutional amendment that would finally put voters first, rather than allowing politicians to draw maps for their own short-sighted interests, this would ban politicians and lobbyists and their family members from getting to draw those maps. This would be a 15-member citizens redistricting commission. These 15 members would be 5 Republican, 5 Democrat, and 5 independent, unaffiliated, or third-party folks. And so we would have party balance, which is something we don't have now, and we would ban those who have self-interest in map drawing from being able to draw those lines.
And I'm going to take us back a step, because in 2015 and in 2018, we did make an effort to pass some changes as it relates to state legislative redistricting reform in 15 and then congressional redistricting reform in 18. What didn't happen well enough that now we're back at it?
Yeah, I mean, so we were hopeful that these reforms would work, mostly because both political parties signed off on them. So we were hoping that because the reforms were works of compromise, that those better angels would prevail in the mapping process. That is not what we saw. Instead, what we saw, this commission made up entirely of elected politicians draw lines to guarantee their own reelection. These maps were struck down by the Ohio Supreme Court 5 times for the State House maps and twice for the congressional maps. The Ohio State House maps are actually more rigged. They are more partisan unfair than last decade, even though we have stronger rules in the Ohio Constitution. When we look at other states and their rules around mapping, what we see is that their rules are similar in terms of fairness and transparency. The big difference is who draws those maps. And unfortunately, the politicians on the redistricting commission here in Ohio have proven that we have to take the pen away from them, that the temptation to just preserve their own power is too great. And that is why we are going back to the ballot box. We're out there collecting signatures right now for citizens, not politicians, because what we saw is the Ohio Supreme Court, though they continued to strike down the maps, didn't really have the authority to hold the redistricting commission accountable, and that the redistricting commission, made up of politicians, was just going to do what they do. Politicians look out for themselves, and we have to take them out of the equation.
My recollection of this is that back in May, they're like, well, we did the best we could do, and this is all we've got, or we already tried and we couldn't do any better than this, and so this is what we... So essentially they kept reintroducing a very similar set of maps that really didn't address the very issues that the constitutional changes attempted to address. Have I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty frustrating. So let's talk for a minute about gerrymandering and its effect on democracy.
Sure.
From your perspective, is there any evidence that suggests that when people find themselves in these districts that are so sort of gerrymandered by the politicians to favor one party or another, that voter turnout changes?
Absolutely. So again, when districts are rigged and we essentially know who's going to win those seats before an election even happens because they're rigged for one party or another, it is exactly that. It's politicians getting to pick who their voters are. Voters are unable to truly hold these legislative office holders accountable because they're going to win their next election. And so then voters start to feel like it doesn't matter what I do. My vote doesn't matter. My vote doesn't count. And we do see a reduction in voter turnout. And really, ultimately, at the end of the day, rigged districts dilute the power of every single Ohio voter. We are unable to hold those lawmakers accountable when they act out of step. And what we continue to see coming, especially from the Ohio State House, are these policies that are wildly unpopular. And that's because these districts are rigged. You know, about 54% of Ohioans vote Republican for the Ohio State House or for Congress, but the Republican lawmakers continue to see a large supermajority. And that's because of that rigging. It's because they are guaranteed to win those seats, no matter what they do. That increases voter frustration, it decreases voter turnout, and it really makes our government unresponsive to the people, which is the exact opposite as to what a representative government like ours should do.
So just for the sake of clarity, when you talk of supermajority, you're talking about Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the governorship. And so through that, then they sort of can manage to push forward legislation in a much stronger way than if they had to collaborate or cooperate maybe with other party members from other areas.
Yeah, and what I'll say is this, like the reason why, let's not worry about the governorship because that can go back and forth, Republican and Democrat. But what we see over the last several decades is that Republican office holders, which are very different than Republican voters are not served by the system, but Republican office holders are holding a lot more seats than votes that they are getting. So, you know, if they get about 54% of the votes, but ultimately are getting well over, you know, about 60 to 70% of the seats in the state house, it shows that they have more power than voters would prefer. It shows that the state house maps, the state house composition is not responsive to the will of the voters because you see that massive mismatch. And that's a problem because, again, what we will see are policies that are truly out of touch with the Ohio people. You know, a gerrymandered legislature will make policies that don't reflect the majority of Ohioans, and most Ohioans, as you said, consider themselves to be moderate or even independent. Voices of voters will be silenced and they will become they will become disengaged. And then candidates will win in just the primary. And we will continue this process over and over again, where once again, the very extreme candidates come out of the primary that then win that seat in the general election. And we once again see a whole nother round of policymaking that's far more extreme than the average Ohioan would like.
I appreciate your explanation. So what we've got then is this problem that's getting in the way of our representative democracy. And if we're going to address that problem, then the means through which the league has found sometimes helpful is to introduce, through a signature process, a constitutional change. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are so excited. You know, the league, again, has been fighting gerrymandering and has been trying to get fair mapping since the 60s. Again, we fought Democrats and Republicans, both through policymaking arenas as well as in the courts. And what we know to be true is that we're not going to get this right until we take politicians out of the process. That means we can't negotiate with the legislature like we did in 2015 and 2018 because they want to keep their power. We have to get our clipboards out, and that's what we've done. The Citizens Not Politicians Amendment is supported by the League and Common Cause, as well as a wide range of other groups, you know, faith leaders, union leaders, teachers, first responders, just a wide range of individuals coming together to call for a 15-member Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission that bans current and former politicians, political party officials, and lobbyists from sitting on that commission. Those are the folks that have a self-interest in drawing lines that work for them, where everyday people are much more likely to draw fair districts.
So then this initiative, and the name of it is Citizens Not Politicians, that's initiating essentially a signing process, right? Trying to gather signatures, and I presume now we have to gather signatures from at least half of the counties in the state of Ohio?
Yep, so we need, by July 3rd, that's when all the signatures are due to the Secretary of State. And we need well over 400,000 valid signatures in 44 counties. And so, you know, when you go to public events or to maybe when you're shopping, maybe you go to the library, you're going to see folks out there with clipboards. Please be nice to them. A lot of them are league volunteers or volunteers of other supporting organizations. They're out there in the cold, just trying to do the best for democracy. Collecting those signatures is key to getting on the ballot. And we hope to be on the ballot in 2024 to win. And then we will draw new maps that would be in effect before 2026. So actually have a chance for fair representation in the Ohio State House and in Ohio's congressional delegation starting in 2026.
That's really helpful. And when I'm in my classroom, I talk about problem, solution, and then I talk about benefits. So if we understand that there's a problem, that our democracy isn't working well because politicians are choosing their voters instead of the voters having an opportunity to truly choose their politicians, and we agree that getting 15 individuals, 5 from the Republican Party, 5 from the Democratic Party, 5 independent, that are not politicians or in any way associated with the political process, if we believe that's the right step, now let's imagine what's going to change. Help me to imagine how perhaps that can improve what we see in our daily opportunities as it relates to local and statewide, countywide, nationwide elections.
Yeah, so since voters are going to draw the lines rather than politicians and lobbyists, we are going to have a better map-making process that's more transparent and open and inclusive. The resulting maps are going to be more fair and representative of the people of Ohio. Politicians will not be guaranteed to win their seat no matter what they do, which means that they have to listen to the constituents in their districts rather than doing whatever they want, knowing that they will always win that seat. So we will have a more responsive Ohio State House. And keep in mind that that's where school funding and a lot of healthcare decisions, transportation infrastructure, so many policies that affect our daily lives are determined by the Ohio State House. And so we want a legislature that feels accountable to voters. We want a legislature that has to listen to its constituents because they know that if they don't, they could lose their seats, they could lose their power. So ultimately, this should mean a better functioning Ohio, that it will affect every aspect of our lives from, education, environment, healthcare, economic development, tourism, taxes, all of those things will mean that our Ohio State House will have to listen to us. And similarly, our congressional delegation will have to listen to us more as well. When gerrymandering is undone, when we finally end gerrymandering, we see politicians more likely to reach across the aisle to work on common sense solutions. And we see politicians are far more willing to listen to their constituents about their needs and interests.
So are there things that citizens can do to learn more that you would recommend?
Yeah, so our coalition is called Fair Districts Ohio, and we've been around for many decades, and we will be around after Citizens Not Politicians passes. So you certainly can check out us. We have a website at fairdistrictsohio.org. You can become a member of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. If you want to read the petition itself, you can look up Citizens Not Politicians and read that amendment. But we are needing volunteers. We need folks that show up and sign those petitions, but we also need thousands of volunteers that are going to go to football games and soccer games and tree lighting ceremonies and 4th of July parties, all to collect signatures. And we are really excited because when volunteers collect signatures, that sends the exact right message that this is really a solution for and by the people of Ohio, that together we're going to gather across county lines, across political differences, to really make sure that our Ohio State House and our Ohio congressional delegation are responsive to us, that those who are elected know that they need to listen to and respect the voices of Ohio voters rather than playing to party extremes and big-pocketed donors.
And that brings up a whole other topic that probably we need to talk about soon, and that is the whole business of dark money in our electoral process, dark money in politics, and even just the amount of money that is necessary. You talk about these issues, and I think about ballot initiatives that actually passed just this past November, where issue 2 was a ballot initiative that passed, and yet even as that passed with specific language, now it's being looked at more carefully by elected officials, and they're sort of rethinking what the people who voted in large numbers said they wanted. So it is, I think, at times a bit frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this. That's an example of the Ohio State House being out of step with the everyday Ohioan. You know, issue 1 in August went down in flames because Ohioans didn't want that, but the General Assembly focused a lot of energy and attention on that rather than fixing school funding, rather than addressing a lot of other issues. Similarly, the Ohio State House implemented this very unpopular, heartbeat ban where most individuals would not be able to get an abortion, even in the case of rape or incest or health concerns. That was wildly unpopular. We had to go to the ballot box as the people to get that passed. And we, the people, not necessarily the league, also passed the recreational marijuana policy that now the General Assembly wants to undo. That is the classic result of gerrymandering. These are folks who have always been able to win their seats no matter how they vote on issues because the maps are rigged. And this is the exact thing that will change when we are able to have voters draw the lines so that politicians can't rig them for their own short-sighted interests. We will see that those who end up getting elected to legislative seats have to listen to us. They have to respond to us, and we will not have such extreme policy discussions coming out of the Ohio State House, but hopefully bipartisan solutions to the issues that matter most to you and me and all of our fellow Ohioans.
I guess I'm hopeful, and maybe that's a flaw that I have no matter what, but I'm hopeful that if we can get politicians out of the gerrymandering process, it could help to create districts that people feel better about and maybe reduce the amount of tension that's created, that sort of bipartisan bickering or whatnot. But I guess I wonder too, to what extent would that redrawing attempt to ensure that urban, suburban, or rural areas are sort of grouped together with individuals, or might that cross those lines, and how might that outcome impact voter interactions?
So this is a real, Citizens Not Politicians is a really strong policy that thinks about all aspects of mapping and how to make it work best, and to really make sure that it is people-centric, that it is really driven for and by the people of Ohio. So one of the pieces is that the commission has to listen to the people of Ohio when they define their community. And so there will be lots of opportunities, lots more notice on when hearings will be, a lot more ability to see those maps in detail that have been proposed and then react to them. And voters will be able to say, for example, there was a lot of conversation in the Dayton area about Trotwood, that Trotwood was continually getting separated from the rest of Dayton. That shouldn't happen, and there will be a chance for Daytonians to come out and talk about what they think their district should be. And the commission not only has to listen, which the last commission sat in their seats and listened often, a lot of times commissioners were not present, but they did listen, but they didn't actually take that learning to fuel the way maps were made. This commission, made up of voters with equal numbers of Republicans, Democrats, and independents, will have to listen to all of us when we show up and testify and talk about how we think the lines should be drawn. So it's a positive in multiple ways. First, taking those out of the mapping process that we know can't be trusted, politicians and lobbyists. Second, requiring equal numbers of Republicans, Democrats, and independents so that it requires bipartisan map making. And finally, creating a process that is open and transparent and inclusive and where the commission listens to the people of Ohio on how those lines should be drawn.
And then hopefully we don't end up with the snake on the lake or the Donald Duck in the middle of the state. I mean, the kind of crazy districts that we do see when you look carefully at the way in which our districts have been drawn up. Well, I appreciate you so much. I think as we kind of close things, I'm wondering if there's any last words, any other insights or next steps that you want to recommend.
You know, this is a stressful time for democracy. It's a stressful time for voters, but it's also a major opportunity for us. We see Ohioans really standing up like they did this August and shutting down a really bad idea of making constitutional amendments harder for citizen groups like ours. We see Ohioans really standing up for democracy, and this is another opportunity. This is our chance to make sure that our Ohio State House and our Ohio congressional delegation are representative of us and responsive to us. So we ask everyone from across the state of Ohio to get out and sign the petition. And if you're interested in volunteering to collect signatures or help in some other way, please contact the League or Fair Districts Ohio.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I want to thank our guest, Jen Miller. She's the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters for the state of Ohio. I want to thank you, our viewers, as you watch today's program on redistricting. The League of Women Voters encourages everyone to be a voter by registering to vote and then actively voting, not once, but every election. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport, and that is the main message that I hear Jen Miller sharing with us today, that we can't just idly watch as things happen. We need to be engaged and involved. So if you need help either registering to vote, learning how to vote, or you have ideas for me suggesting upcoming program ideas, please contact the League by emailing league@lwvdayton.org, or you can call our office. The number there is 937-228-4041. Thank you for joining us today. Jen, thank you for taking time with us today. We wish you safe and happy holidays.